So today we're going to practice how to count atoms, and so we're going to go through the steps that you need to go through each time that you're asked to calculate the number of atoms. So the first thing that we do is look for the elements. So in our first scenario, we have one capital letter. Capital C, we know, represents carbon. Now, we've been talking about subscripts. In this case, there's no subscript written behind carbon. So if there is no subscript, that means there's one atom of that element. Don't tell me 0 atoms. There are never 0 atoms. There would be no reason for us to write the symbol for carbon. So for this element, we have carbon and we only have one atom. So our total atoms are 1 and we have one element. Now in our next scenario, CO2. So for carbon dioxide, we're going to look first at the elements. We have a capital C and a capital O. So in this formula, I have carbon and I have oxygen. So I have 2 total elements. Now, to count the atoms of each one, I look first to see if there's a subscript. For the C, there is no subscript, so that would be 1 atom. For the oxygen, we do have a subscript of 2. Remember, the subscript tells me the number of atoms. So for oxygen, I have 2 atoms. So on this, I could ask you how many atoms of carbon? 1. How many atoms of oxygen? 2. Or I could say how many total atoms, and I would have to add them up. 2 plus 1 for 3 total atoms. So this would be my total. Okay. So in carbon dioxide, we have 2 elements and 3 total atoms. Now, they can get a little bit more complicated when there are parentheses. So if there are parentheses, we need to look to our chemical formula. Same steps, you're first going to identify the elements, looking for our capital letters. So we have magnesium, we have oxygen, and we have hydrogen. So again, we're looking for subscripts. Now, I have these parentheses. For right now, I want to forget about the parentheses. Forget they even exist. I just want to look for subscripts. So behind magnesium, there is no subscript. So there's 1 atom. Behind oxygen, there is no subscript. So there's also 1. Behind hydrogen, inside the parentheses, there is no subscript. So there is 1 atom. Now, we need to do something just like we would do in math class. If you recall something in math called the distributive property. So we need to distribute the 2 that's outside the parentheses to everything inside the parentheses. So now I need to multiply anything that's inside the parentheses times the subscript outside the parentheses. So now I know I have 2 atoms of oxygen and 2 atoms of hydrogen. My total amount of atoms, 1 plus 2 plus 2, I have a total of 5 atoms in this compound. Now, if I look, I also have a total of 3 elements. Okay. So you need to make sure you're clear on what you're being asked. Are you being asked for the elements? Are you being asked for the atoms for each element? Or are you being asked for the atoms that are the total for the compound? So let's practice. So let's take a look at our compound. We have NaC2H3O2. So the first thing we're going to do is identify our elements. Again, looking for the capital letters. So I have sodium, I have carbon, I have hydrogen, and I have oxygen. So in this case, I'm looking, I don't see any parentheses, so I'm looking just for subscripts. So for sodium, I have 1, carbon, I have 2, hydrogen, I have 3, and oxygen, I have 2. If I'm asked for my total, if we add them up, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 2, we have a total of 8 atoms. Now remember, I could also ask you how many elements. If we look, 1, 2, 3, 4, we have 4 elements. Okay. So if there are no parentheses, you are just looking at the subscripts. Right. So let's look at our next one. Al2SO4 3. So for this one, we do have parentheses. So we're still going to go through our steps. We're going to identify our elements first. Al, S, and O. Just looking at my capital letters. Al, S, and O. Now, if I see you making a lot of mistakes, I might ask you to actually write out the element names. But if we're good, we'll just write the symbols. So forgetting about our parentheses for now, we're just going to look at our subscripts. So for aluminum, we have 2. For sulfur, we have 1. And for oxygen, we have 4. Now, because we have a subscript outside the parentheses, we have to distribute to the S and to the O. So we're going to multiply each of those times the 3. Okay. So now when we look at our total, I have to add the 2 plus the 3 plus the 12. So we end up with a total of 17 atoms in our compound. And we have a total of 3 elements. Okay. All right, so we're going to be practicing this, but if you need to refer back, you also have notes in your IMB, I believe on slide 35.